Joining us on Agree to Disagree, I'm John Cockrell.
And my name is Don McKinnon, and we're going to start this evening with subjects that interest us for about, we'll each go a half hour, and then
Roughly.
we will say see you in 2 weeks. First one I'm going to start off is the Ukraine, and that one there, John, I say both of you and I know about it, but how much of an expert, I guess, we are. But I will tell you something, the frightening part is how much is anybody in the United States an expert on the Ukraine. But it comes down to Putin, and the question is, what exactly is he looking for? I'll give you my opinion on what he's looking for. He's looking to reunite Russia as the way it was prior to his obtaining power.
I agree.
The fact that when the wall came down, he was very disappointed that Russia surrendered, if you will. Well, basically, most of the world surrendered its satellites, and so therefore it wasn't the worst thing in the world to happen. But one of the problems he ran into was that was a seaport that he gave up, and that, I got to admit, if I were him, I think I'd be a little concerned about that. Although sometimes you can control something without forcing people to adhere to your rule. But now, of course, we've got the second phase, which is the Ukraine. And it is my opinion that it is close to him doing it, and therefore we're going to have Europe move in extraordinary ways. And I have, till beat the dead horse, say that the future wars with these kind of powers will be economic rather than military. And basically, he's proving my point, because what he's doing is he's saying to the Ukraine, if I charge you, I'm going to use a number $10, I'm going to charge you $50 for that same amount. So you've got to come up with another 40. Well, of course, they're on the brink of bankruptcy anyway. The problem that Russia enters into is most of the satellites that they want to take back are near bankruptcy anyway. And the only thing that saved Russia was the oil and the gas. Without the oil and the gas, they'd be bankrupt. So you got a whole group of people that don't understand business. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on the brink of bankruptcy. And they are on the brink of bankruptcy. So now they're going to charge the Ukraine 4 to 5 times what they did. Then, now they're saying, you're going to have to pay me in advance, or I'm not going to give it to you. So what's going to happen is, if he's not careful, the world is going to have to come and supply oil and gas to those countries. You're not going to do it with a soldier. You're not going to invade Russia and take over oil and gas. But you can do it by taking oil and gas and giving. Now, here's the catch-22, though. Most of Europe is dependent upon Russia for the oil or the gas. So you see what's happened is we've boxed ourselves into a corner, which when I said we don't have the solution on this, who does? That's what I'm saying. Who does? And I will tell you the one thing, though, that I think that Russia is concerned about anyway, besides being a brute and a bully. I think they're concerned with having respect. I think they want to go to their table and sit down with those other countries and being given respect. And what those countries are now saying to them is, we're going to not, the 8 groups are getting together, there's only 7, not you. So automatically now they're beginning to lose respect. Very interesting thing. What's your thoughts on that, John? What's our solution?
It's a very, very complex issue, and I think it's unfortunate that we got all the way to this point without having been able to work out some sort of settlement on this situation.
With him or the Ukraine or with
Both.
Europe? With everybody.
With everybody.
Because Europe depends upon Russia for oil and gas.
That's right. And gauging Putin's philosophy, as you know, he was former KGB.
As was I, former President CIA.
You can tell by the gratuitous pictures that we've seen on TV that He's a tough guy.
Oh yeah, well,
Bare-chested,
yeah.
fishing,
He's like me.
riding
He's
the
a little
horse.
guy. Those are
Yeah,
terrible people, little guys,
exactly.
because they get what you call little guy complex.
And he's tough. And to be
Yeah.
honest with you, I think
I don't think
they,
he'd go 3 rounds with you, but that's okay.
oh, well, maybe he would. I don't know. I appreciate your confidence. But I think what happens here is that you have Obama, who's a talker and a diplomat, and you have Putin, who's a fighter. And I believe Putin would probably go quite a distance, even with painful economic sanctions, before he would cave in
He's done it.
or
He's already done it.
abandon his
Yeah.
project. I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
I think what he'd like to do is get the former Soviet Union back intact. He's not going to do that. There's no way he can do that, and I'll tell you what he might do. As you know, when you look at the surrounding countries, I think he is going to go into Ukraine. I don't
Possible?
think, yes,
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be stopped. And I don't think we're going to do anything necessarily militarily at that point. If he tries to go beyond that, I honestly think that then the countries will see how this is coming together. Remember, we've got Hitler here all over again. Do we want to allow anything like that to occur? We can't. And therefore, I think at that time we'd go back to NATO and we'd go back to our allies and all other countries and reach an understanding that we'd have to show a real show of force by getting those troops out there. Now, I'm not saying we attack them necessarily, but we get them out there. But at this point, it's very, very difficult to see him backing off, even of the Ukraine. You know, they may diddle around the corners, but remember, he's got, what, 40,000 troops out on the border already of Ukraine?
And he's sneaking people over the line who are
Yes, he is.
starting trouble.
That's right. They're starting trouble. They're taking over police barracks.
Yeah.
And these are so-called thugs. Well, they're Russians, obviously.
Yeah.
So what he's
They're
doing...
professional
Yeah,
thugs.
he's bringing them in there,
Yeah.
and they're priming the scene for an easier attack once he does decide to go after Ukraine. So that's kind of the way I think about that. All he understands is strength, and unfortunately our president has exhibited anything but that in his entire foreign policy. That's another thing I think Putin feels entitled to go ahead.
That's a debate separate from this,
Yes, it
but
is. I think we've
nonetheless
had part of
connected
it.
to it, nonetheless.
Yes, that's right.
Let me go into our next subject, which is, this to me, and people who know me know, I've always said, this is the greatest country in the world. We are so fortunate to be born in this country.
no question.
We had no choice of, but here we are, and so fortunate we are. There's two things that the current government, not just because of the current people, but traditionally they do. One is they turn on their own, John. And what is the excuse for turning on your own? There is no excuse. How do they look themselves in the mirror? The two they turn on, and the one I will get to later maybe, maybe not, but the one I'll get to right now is the college student. You and I agree, I believe, that without education, this country isn't what its potential. So
No
we
question.
need education. Education is another debate on this. But the one thing that students are doing to themselves now, because of the expense in colleges, they're boxing themselves in financially so that even if they get a good job that pays well, they owe so much in student loans, their quality of life will never quite catch up. Now that's not right. And I am sorry to say that you go to college today, when you and I went to college, John, people they know how much we paid. You know? Now, I'm going to give you a ballpark: $25,000 for the college and $25,000 to live in, $50,000 a year times 4, 200, and sometimes fifth, 250, $250,000 to get your diploma, of which many of these students borrow money. Well, it's bad enough they have to borrow, but to my way of thinking, if a student stays in this country, if he goes somewhere else, I mean, all right, you know, but if he stays in this country, he should pay no interest. What is the government charging its students interest rate? Well, not only are they charging them interest rate now, and this is where I am very pleased with Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
And I wasn't originally, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't impressed with her. But she is fighting them now to maintain a low interest rate on student loans. The United States government, who's supposed to be on the kids' side is making money off the kids. That's, I mean, how do you look at yourself in the mirror after you take a student who's almost broke anyway, graduates from school, starts an employment, can be for 30 or 40,000. Some of them I know are 100, but some of them are 30, and they start college and they owe these outrageous interest rates on these loans. Shame on the United States government for doing it. And Warren is fighting it, and by the way, she's retroactively fighting it, because what the government's doing is they may go down in interest rate for the current student, but for the ones that they're not grandfathering legislation for those kids. And here these kids, they got nothing to look forward to but paying off a debt. They're trying to get out of debt. They're trying to get married and have 2 children and lead the good life and drive an automobile. That's not asking for too much, John.
Don, I agree with you on that, and I would say that, you know, as you mentioned, education is so critically important. It's critically important to our future. If you look at it strictly from a government economic perspective, you know, if you really think about it, if it were easier for these kids to get a college education, there'd be a lot more kids out there making more money, which means what? More taxes for the government.
Yeah.
But on the short-sighted side, let's get our interest now, or let's discourage kids from not going to college. And so I agree with you. That's one of our precious resources. That should not be, as far as I'm concerned, it shouldn't be interrupted in any way.
Stop playing games with the kids.
Right.
Well, one of them, quick, I got to get off my own subjects as I do, you know me. But one of them is where the governor will say to the students, look below your chair, you'll see if you pass high school and the MCAS, oh, you can go to a state college for nothing. So the poor kid who has nothing, I mean, he's got nothing. He takes his little coupon, he goes to the state college, and the admissions person says, well, there's nothing. However, there's fees. Well, how much are the fees? Slightly higher than the college.
It's getting that way, I know.
What do you say to a governor or anybody who says to the kids, you're going for nothing, and then you find out he's giving you 40 cents on the dollar, you got to come up with another 60 cents. Shame on, Oprah doesn't do that, although if she gives you an automobile, you do have to pay.
That's true.
You do have to pay the taxes on the
excise tax.
John, don't get me going on that. Let me talk about the country that you and I kind of like to talk about once in a while, China. China is a mix-up to China. They really don't know where they want to fit into this puzzle, because there's so many people there. There's so many, therefore, bright people there. Life is good now for many people in China. The only problem is they've got these other hang-ups from times gone by, like, do we now have control over part of Asia because we're the most powerful country in Asia and all sorts of stuff. So they got problems. But the one that to me is the funniest, and I have a strange sense of humor, as you well know, is the environment. They are going to come out with electric cars because we don't want to pollute the environment. You cannot breathe in China. You can do everything but breathe. And then we're going to have an electric car, we're going to plug it into a thing, and that way we won't pollute. What do you mean you won't pollute? Your whole country, when they had the Olympics there, they had to shut down China. Excuse me, they're going to close down for 3 weeks prior to the Olympics to get the air to get up. Do you know California has pollutants coming from China? I mean, what is with that country? But it's a funny country. I like it. I wouldn't travel to it, but and by the way, many people who work there, people don't know this, many people who work in China are promised by their large corporation early retirement, extra bonus. It's like you're being sent to a place that's terrible. And in some cases, I guess it is. Whereas the Chinese people come here, many of them want to stay, John. I don't mean to say that, but they do.
Yeah, I would say that China's sudden interest in the green technology and so forth has to be based on the dollar, Don.
Yeah, but isn't that funny?
Got to be some way to make a profit off of that, because they certainly never showed any consideration for it. No. And quite frankly, I've always been frustrated with that, because when you hear about these countries like the United States and other countries that are looking forward. They're concerned about
Thinking
green
green.
technology.
Yeah, we are.
But we're such a small part of the globe.
That's it.
And that's silliness.
And it's
because
hard to argue for it,
so
John,
the
when we're
swine
the only
from
guy
China
doing
will
it.
just be spread over to what? Look, you just said they're in
Yes,
California.
yeah, California's got China
So there you
smart.
go. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure how beneficial
Yeah,
that is. But,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's funny to watch these countries that preach one thing but can't do another. For example, Europe is in trouble with Russia because they are dependent upon their oil and gas too,
Yeah.
as would we be.
Especially Germany. Germany's getting to be a very powerful nation again, certainly influential and economic, but they really depend on Russia. So for Merkel
Yeah.
to be able to align herself and Germany with the European countries and the free countries is extremely difficult because she might think that's warranted based on Putin's moves, but at the same time, where's she going to get her energy and her oil and her gas from?
Germany and Japan, of course, were countries that had trouble because of their lack of size for natural resources.
Right.
Therefore, they had to import. This is the reason they've gone to war so often with other people. But they're historically very good at war, unfortunately, for people.
Actually, they are.
And
If you really look at
They
World
are.
War II, and I know you know a lot about World War II, and I've made it my business
And
to
you would
learn
know,
something
too.
about
Sure.
it as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And I think to myself that, if we didn't drop that bomb, things
Yeah.
weren't going all that well in
No.
a lot of areas,
No.
particularly with
No.
the Japanese.
this is why China had best be careful. And I think they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah,
Down deep, China is concerned about Japan.
Yeah.
Years ago, before you and I were born, even before I was born, Jules Verne used to write different stories about the future.
yes,
And one of his stories, which was excellent, was China coming to us and saying, Russia's going over the line and they're doing this, that, and the other thing. Here's a guy that over 150, 200 years ago was alive, and he foresaw things that are
Right.
happening in the year 2014.
Right.
What an amazing
Yeah.
person he was. But the point is, that is what is happening with these countries like Japan. Japan is the most powerful country in Asia, but it can't be because it's got treaties saying it will not form a military force.
Right.
And if they did form a military force, now that China and North Korea and all, it's best you don't go to war with those countries. So there's really a bind. But you're right about Germany, because Germany is such a clever country. The people there are so, not that other people aren't, but the Germans have an established work ethic that much of Europe does not have. We just talked about the French. The French take August off. Can you imagine calling up July, the end of July, and say, well, I'll see you.
Yeah.
I'll see you in September.
Well,
What
it's
do you
kinda-
think you see me in
I
September?
mean, it's kind of like our Congress.
Well, we wish they'd take August off.
We wish they'd work that
Yeah, wish
long.
they'd go home and stay home. That's what we wish they'd do. That's another. Okay, I was into China, and I'll give you one other thing, that this one here is a trivia. I do trivia.
Okay.
And I had a professor at Babson one time, and he forecasted to the day the crash of the stock market. Now, that's how old I am, and that's how old
You're
he
talking
was.
about the original crash of the stock market?
1929.
Yeah.
He forecasted it. And he did it, believe it or not, with weather charts. His idea was that weather determines how people do it. And he told us he did, he broke into the Harvard professor's war charts, who was the historical person who wouldn't show him his charts. All these brilliant people have charts. They love charts. And his weather charts and the war charts were identical based on weather. And he could actually, this guy was under the
The
employ.
original hacker.
He was also under the employ of the United States government.
Yeah.
Because when we went into the Depression, they hired him to find out when we were coming out.
Yeah.
And as a result at Babson, what do you do with a guy like that? You know what he taught? Speed reading. Because who wants to take weather at
Yeah, I
Babson,
know.
right? So that was
Yeah.
one of those. But I'll just say to you, weather is a factor in wars, and so that's another
Yeah,
story.
it's
That's-
interesting.
well, that it isn't, but I thought I would say it just for the sake of it all. Here's a statistic that's frightening, John. Where are we now? How are we doing? I think,
Well, you got 10 more minutes.
have I? Okay. All right. I'm a little bit lost on that clock now.
That's okay.
Okay. Here's a statistic, John. 1 out of 3 homeless are veterans. Now, when you realize how
That
many
doesn't
veterans
surprise
are
me.
there? Yeah, but how many veterans are there?
Yeah.
1 out of 1,000 is a veteran. If that, 1 out of 2 or 3,000 is a. There are no veterans around anymore, you know. Stand in the crowd and say, "Well, everybody who's been in the Army, please stand up." And
Yeah.
2 guys get up. You say, "Where did they all go?" So, but 1 out of 3 is homeless. 1 out of 5 has the post-traumatic
Yeah.
stress. 1 out of 5. And here's the other thing. I'm back on the United States government. Shame on them, what they did. The United States government does not take care of the veterans properly. And
I
I
agree.
think we might have talked about that before. We've agreed to agree on that.
Yeah.
But the shame of it is they don't get it. They don't understand it. And so therefore, there's all sorts of groups around doing things for veterans. Well, it's very nice they do that. They shouldn't have to do that, though, because they should have, the government should take care of them. What the point of it is,
Yeah.
if the United States government wants to go to your family and mine and say, have your son or daughter volunteer and go in the service if you don't mind, I do mind. And I think congratulations to the families that advocate their children should go into the service today, because the United States government are full of ingrates. One of the things we're doing, and people do understand this, because of the advanced medical now, they're living where they used to die. And so therefore, now they've come home, but they've got real major problems, sometimes with the brain and sometimes with the physical. And so as a result of that, though, it is the United States government that shouldn't get away from them as quick as they can. They're doing it, though.
Yeah.
Suicide rates are dramatic.
Yes.
Later, you're going to talk about women in combat, I think, if we get to that.
Right.
And they're mistreating women as far as, now, I know we agree to disagree on this, though, but to me, a bunch of generals making a decision on whether a woman has been violated in the United States service, get some women in on that judgment, if you don't mind, that, women who go into the service shouldn't face just a male.
I agree with that.
Okay, so those are things. So these are things, John, which I'm just saying what's happening is that the United States government has to start to take care of its own, and those are disabled veterans.
There's no question about that.
And we'll get anywhere from, there are doctors who will tell you, and one of them testified in a hearing I went to on concussions, we are in the dark ages on the brain. We don't know what we're doing as far as the brain's concerned. And as a result of that, anything from sports to war injuries, we've always had it. In the World War I, we had it. In World War II, we gave it different names, though, didn't we? They used to, what do they call them, John? Battle fatigue,
Right.
shell shock.
Shell shock was a big
was
one.
World War I.
That was a big one.
Shell shock.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing that
Which
kids
is
have today.
post-traumatic stress syndrome
Absolutely the
today,
same
yeah.
thing we have it today. We changed the name. And in Vietnam,
Yeah.
the government couldn't get far enough away
Yeah.
from the injury of the soldiers, and to this day they can't get far enough away.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing about, and I've always said about the 100-year war, don't go to war with a country that gets engaged in the 100-year war, because you're just an asterisk C below. And the country that
Yeah.
says asterisk C below is Vietnam.
Yeah.
Some of our most honored people, many of our honored people, fought in the Vietnam War. They were not treated properly, and they would let you
No.
know that, and they should let
It
you
was
know that.
tragic.
But now
Absolutely
you
tragic.
go to Macy's and you open up the made in Vietnam.
Right.
And so,
oh, absolutely.
So and then, but you can go to Vietnam, and they treat you with such respect because they look at our war as not even a war. Asterisk C below, war, C below. There was a war with the United States.
Yeah.
Why? We were only there for 4 or 5 years. To them,
Yeah.
they hardly got their coats off, and we were checking out of that place. It's crazy, the wars that we get ourselves involved in. But the point is, the United States government, if they want to keep taking men and women volunteer, they've got to start to see them. You say, well, through the rest of their life? Yes. Yes, through the rest of their life. Yes, buy them a home. Yes, make sure they have
Well, you
enough
know,
money for
I
them.
agree with that, Don, and as a matter of fact, I continually ask myself, when I see the plight of our veterans coming home, two things hit me immediately. One, I'm saddened because when you talk about, places like Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of boys and girls died over there.
Yes, they did.
And because of political decisions or whatever decisions, both of those countries have practically reverted to what they were before we ever sent our blood and treasure over there. So that's the first thing that
So
hits
then
me.
we were only there 10 years. Not too bad.
Right, and then you think in Afghanistan, for instance, you're right about the longevity. Afghanistan's been at war for decades and decades.
And they will be the day we leave.
Right, and the Russians couldn't put them down.
And they told
I
us.
don't know what made us think
And
we
the
were going
French
to go
told
in
us
there
don't
and
go
put
to.
them down.
People give us
Yeah.
advice. John, we don't listen.
Yeah, but they don't try to give our veterans
Yeah.
what they should get. And the interesting thing is this, though.
Yeah.
Again, spiting off our nose, there's a possibility here that as that people see that, they see how the veterans are being treated.
Yeah.
It's sad. Now, if you want to continue to fill these ranks in the services,
Yes.
you don't want that bad scenery all over the
Yeah.
place with the way the veterans get treated. So we're not thinking about, we're going to have boys and girls that want to go into the
Yeah.
services
Yeah.
in the future
Yeah.
if they keep getting treated like that. So I think that's important, and I think that's something that we're ignoring.
I think that, for example, I know in my family, my father, uncles,
Yeah.
World War One. My cousin, brother, World War Two. Myself, Korean War.
Yeah.
And that's the McKinnon family. But my children have
Yeah.
not been in the service.
Well,
I
yeah.
would not advise them to go into
Well,
the
not
service.
only
I know
that
some
now,
are
there's
saying,
some
well, you know.
complications here
Yeah.
now. I'm going to get into the woman combatants if we have a
Sure.
chance
Oh, yeah.
later on. If not, we'll continue it.
Now
today.
we got to, I'm back on the clock.
We'll continue it on the next show. Yeah, you got me back on the clock.
I know.
But I would say that, if in fact,
Hmm.
I think it's rather ironic here that we're cutting back on our military,
Yes, we are.
seriously cutting back.
Yes, we are.
300,000,
Yeah.
which is the lowest amount of soldiers we've had since World War II. So, and we're doing this at a time when the perils around the world, and particularly in eastern countries like, Russia, Ukraine, Iran, you name it,
Yeah.
are escalating.
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself, what's going on here? Does the right hand know what the left hand's doing? We're cutting back on our ability to
Oh,
defend ourselves
I believe they do
at
know what they're
at a
doing.
time, and not
Yeah, I
only
know.
that,
Yeah.
it's not even mysterious anymore. At least, over the last 20 years or so, we had no indication that Russia was going to come in and suddenly start taking over countries again. And we were also, what were we saying? Well, you don't need any soldiers anymore
Yeah.
because there's no combatants on the ground. Well, there sure as heck might be combatants on the ground if Russia goes into the Ukraine with all its soldiers and starts picking off the surrounding countries.
But see-
then,
Yeah.
Don, you ask yourself, given the way our soldiers are being trained, and I use soldiers, by the way, generically to
Yeah,
cover
okay. No, I
all
know.
the services,
I know. Yeah, service.
which I deeply respect. And, are they going to want to go over there knowing there's a battle? No, you know what? You're going to have to bring conscription back.
You're not far from it right now, by
And,
the
and
way.
then
We've
what are
got
you
a lot
going to
of-
say?
We got a lot
And
of
then,
soldiers supporting over there.
by the way, when that happens,
Yeah.
what happens with the women combatants? They're actually going to go over there and fight hand-to-hand combat. So there's a lot that's wrong right now, Don. A lot that's wrong.
We've
But
got,
the
we've
worst
got,
thing
we've
is
got
treating the
professional soldiers over there now,
Yeah,
people
yeah.
who served their term
Right.
in military, and now they come back as private
Right.
combatants, and we pay for them.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand this over to you on time because
All right.
sometimes I'm on time. I was late this
Very
morning.
good. No, you did
So-
very well
so-
today. Your timing, mine probably won't be half as good, but
Well, no, they're better because I'm stumbling.
I have 4 topics that I might try to get to.
Sure.
One of them is called Common Core,
Yep.
which is the new educational system in the United States. I'd like to mention, talk a little bit about that knife attack at the Pennsylvania high school. I'd like to talk about the Nevada feds and the rancher confrontation.
Those are
You
great
probably
topics.
saw a lot of
Yeah,
that
I
on
know.
TV.
I know.
And then finally, the update on women in combat.
In combat.
But before I start that, just briefly, I want to talk about the Oscar Pistorius case, which I believe the people in our audience are they probably familiar with because,
I think they are, milady.
yeah, that's right. There's been so much on TV about that, and that's a sad, sad thing because
Well, it is because he shot the lady.
he did. Oscar Pistorius, for those of you that might
Yeah.
not know about this case, is an athlete that runs on metal legs. In fact, they call him the Blade Runner. And he's quite good, and he's competitive on a national scene.
Yes, he is.
He had a girlfriend, and on this one particular evening not too long ago, he said he heard a burglar in the house in the middle of the night. He was in bed with his fiancée or his girl, and so he thought that the intruder was in the bathroom. So he crawled over to the bathroom with his gun, and he fired 4 shots into the bathroom door. Lo and behold, it turned out that he killed his girlfriend. She was the one that was in the bathroom. Now, he's trying to say, without going into a lot of details here, he's trying to say that he thought a burglar was breaking in. And that's why he shot into the door 4 times. He was afraid the burglar was going to attack him. He didn't bother to check the bed to see if his girlfriend was still in bed. He didn't see the girlfriend in bed, and it's been going back and forth, back and forth. What's unique about that, I believe personally that he's probably going to get manslaughter, not murder, because he is, I will say this about him, he is very, very emotional, I guess it's a way to explain it. He breaks down in court and cries all the time. But now, with all that going on, here's what I really want to talk about that I find interesting. Unlike our system of justice, where you have 12 jurors, and if one juror says not guilty, that's it. They're not guilty. Over there, he has one judge, and he has 2 advisors to the judge. No jury. No jury at all.
No.
So, I don't believe that that's fair for a number of reasons. I'll tell you why.
Aren't there some trials here that maybe it's civil, John? You
Yeah,
more
civil,
aware,
you could do
that you
that.
can pick whether you want jury
Yes.
or judge,
Civil, you could do that,
Yeah.
but not criminal.
not criminal.
Here, you have this one judge, happens to be a lady judge, and 2 advisors, like I say, but the only one that can make the decision on this case
the
to
judge.
save his life
Yeah.
or put him to death is the judge.
I may be wrong on this one, but we'll Google it and find
All
out.
right.
There's only about 5 nations that execute. We're one of them. North Korea is another one.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
So
but
supplement for
South
put him to
Africa,
death, say life in
this-
prison.
this-
Let's say that.
I
Let's
hate
say
to
it's
say it.
life
I
in
think they
prison.
said 25 years.
Anyway, he's trying to get off saying that it was defense. Like
That's
I said,
right.
I think it's manslaughter.
Yeah.
But here's where I think that's unfair. You know, our fathers in our wisdom decided that if we're going to be judged fairly, we should be judged by a jury of our peers.
Yes, that's ours. That's ours.
And generally, they put
Yeah.
a dozen people on the jury
Yeah.
to make sure that we
Yeah.
get a fair shake.
That's right. And one can throw the thing out.
This
yeah.
judge decides, think about this.
Milady.
Milady, yeah, I'll get to that in a second. Explain, now they're going to want to know what you're talking about with Milady.
They know.
Yeah.
Everybody's watching.
This judge gets to decide,
Yeah.
in effect, whether he's guilty or innocent. There is
Yeah.
no jury. There's only a couple of advisors, but
Yeah.
they don't have any
Yeah.
votes.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's right, because if this judge had a prejudice, and one person can have a
You're in
prejudice,
a lot of trouble. Yeah.
you know, then in
Yeah.
that case, that's not a fair trial.
No, you're absolutely correct.
Do you want your life to depend on one person's vote, or do you want your life to depend on more than one? Now, having said that, I think our jury system favors the criminal, particularly.
Well, because all you
Particular.
got to convince is 1 out of 12.
That's right, 1 out of 12, right? Wouldn't it make more sense to say, hey, let's not be stupid about this. Let's
Yeah.
take 3 people,
Yeah.
give them each a vote, and then the 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 decide. At least you've got different opinion, but you're not watering it down so much
Yeah.
that you're bound to find somebody in there.
I
sympathetic.
pragmatically would say if you can convince 10 out of 12, you should have a decision. I don't think one person should be able to create a mistrial.
But that's how we favor, again, we favor the criminal.
Well, yeah.
And the other thing that applies in that case, which doesn't apply here,
Well, you're saying criminal if the person,
Yeah.
if the person didn't do it, he's not she's not a criminal.
no, but he did it. But that's my view, Don. The judge in this case, okay, think about that.
Okay.
The judge is hardened. She's probably heard many cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the judge isn't going to be subjected to emotion. And he's very emotional. They've had to interrupt the court trial several
I know,
times because
I
he's crying all the time.
Well, he thinks
Now,
it'll work for him.
if that were a jury,
Yeah.
let's say it's a mixed jury
Yeah.
of 12 people,
Yeah.
you can't tell me that if you heard him, that one he couldn't get one to say, "Oh, I feel so bad for him. He didn't do it." This judge is not going to think that way. Right in accordance with
Yeah.
the law. Forget his emotion. So he's at a disadvantage
Yeah.
with it. Anyway, I wanted to bring that.
No, I think, no, I agree with you on that fact, but then again, the last time we met, we decided that a young lady from the western part of the United States being convicted in Italy shouldn't
Yes.
be sent back to Italy. So we
That's
do
right.
have our difference with
Yes,
the
we do.
world, and we enjoy being,
Yeah,
we've already said we enjoy being in America. But I understand what you're saying, especially, here's another thing I'll tell you about. Lawyers are very smart people. They're not there by accident.
That's right.
And if they feel as if they've got a trial coming up and the judge is going to have the hearing on it, and it isn't a judge that likes people who do certain things, they're going
Right.
to try to get another judge.
Yeah.
They try to get before another judge.
Yeah.
So you're right about this. If this Malay, and by the way, we're explaining
and what's
Malady.
wrong with 3?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
3 is perfect, right?
Don't
So
know
one
if
guy-
it is.
one person's
But I'm
enough.
saying, if you get this one person and she's forever sending everybody to jail,
Right.
then yeah, I would say that you'd be, if you were the defense
Yeah.
attorney, you'd be trying to A, find another way to do things, or B, and I guess that's their form of justice. But I say get another judge.
Just to meet my commitment about explaining my lady, as you put it earlier
Yeah, okay,
on.
give us my
What
lady.
Don is saying
So
is
there are
that
people out there that don't know what we're talking.
for some reason over there, and particularly as this is the case with Oscar Pistorius, when the prosecutor asks him a question, he doesn't respond like you and I would in an American court.
To the man that gave the question.
Yeah. What he does is he answers the question that the prosecution asks with a response to the judge. So, if he agrees with what the prosecution is asking, he says, "Yes, my lady." If he disagrees with what the prosecutioner is asking, he says, "No, my lady." Or he says, "That's not true, my lady." It's a bit weird because the prosecution is asking the questions,
Yeah.
but he's always addressing the judge. That's what Don was talking about earlier. I'd like to move quickly to, you saw this knife attack at Pennsylvania High School.
Yes, yes.
All right. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up, first of all, I think all of you know about that. That was all over the news. But what happened is a student armed with a knife went on a stabbing and slashing spree at a high school near Pittsburgh, leaving as many as 20 people injured. Imagine that.
Yeah.
With a knife. 20
Yeah.
people injured.
And a slight young man, too.
Okay, yes. Including 4 students who suffered serious wounds, authorities said.
Yeah.
All of the victims were expected to survive through a trauma surgeon, though a trauma surgeon at the hospital where it was most of the wounded were taken, said some suffered potentially life-threatening injuries. Now, several teens and 1 adult were listed in serious condition, and the suspect, they found, used 2 kitchen knives to commit this mayhem.
Yeah.
Think of it. Kitchen knives.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a Rambo type of blade here.
It's
We're
not a butter knife, but
no,
it's
we're
still
not
a
talking
knife.
about a spear,
No,
a
we're not
spear.
yeah, no.
We're talking about 2 kitchen
Yeah.
knives. Now, how can
Yeah.
a kid coming into a school with 2 kitchen knives end up injuring
Stabbing that many
20
people.
people
Yeah.
before they finally stopped him? Now, I'm going to tell you
They
how.
said a principal or a vice principal, rather a physical type of gentleman,
Yeah,
stopped him.
yeah, wrestled him to the floor. Finally.
That's right.
But the reason why I bring this up is it was a tragic event. There's no question about it. Luckily, everybody lived, even though they had serious injuries, and some
Sure.
of them are going to be injured for life. The reason why I looked at that is because 3 things. Do you remember when we discussed gun control?
Vaguely.
We were talking about guns. I happen to think it was one of our best shows, but you may feel
Yeah.
otherwise.
You got the nickname Boom Boom after that.
Yeah,
I do
the
remember
Boom.
that. Boom Boom.
Now, so the question starts here, comes to my mind again, and it says, how could this have been prevented?
yeah.
And I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
Could have been prevented the same way.
With a gun.
No, well, That
Blow his
too.
brains out.
It could have.
Shoot him.
It could have been prevented the same way as the school shootings that we've had could have been prevented.
Give people
Same
machine guns.
basic
Give
things.
them a
Number one.
flamethrower.
Number
Give them a
one.
flamethrower.
Number one, there was no metal detectors in the school. No metal detectors. Now, you couldn't get in to the school with 2 kitchen knives if you had a metal detector. That's number one. Number two, there was no armed guard in the school.
Yeah.
An armed guard might have been able to, subdue him a lot sooner before he harmed all those peaches. And number three, there were no designated armed teachers in the school.
Oh, you're not going back to giving the teachers
Yes,
guns.
I am.
I can name
I
some teachers
absolutely
that
am.
would blow their legs off trying
No,
to fire
I'm
a
not
gun.
saying give everybody a gun.
Okay, just
if somebody's
certain-
uncomfortable with a gun and doesn't know how to handle a gun, or shouldn't have a gun. But there are many, I think, that would be willing to do that. If that happened,
See, no,
this
agree
guy
with
would
you
have
on
been
that.
stopped.
I don't
with,
think I'd want. I don't think
Dawn,
I'd want
this
to.
guy would have been stopped with his butter knives a lot earlier than 20 people.
Yeah.
So I just bring that up.
I
for
love you
discussion.
conservatives, though. You're determined to get teachers with guns. You just want them to have some.
There you go.
Shoot
absolutely.
them out. John Wayne type of
You
thing.
spend 2 weeks with me out on the range, and I'll turn you into a gun person. How's that?
I spent more than 2 weeks on the range in
Yeah,
my
I know
career.
you did, but this
And-
this is the war.
And I've never had a gun in my house, and I've never had one in my classroom. That's for sure.
Yeah, imagine that. See, well,
But-
you
but
wouldn't,
no, it was
you
a
wouldn't
terrible
do
thing.
much to stop these.
You know,
nuts,
here we
then,
go
would you?
again, though. They say, now I don't know if this is true, and we go back to the thing, which I am sorry to say does not seem to have a solution. Bullying. This young man was bullied,
Yeah.
evidently, and he came in with what he considered
But
an
Don-
equalizer and went for the kids, I guess, that bullied
I
him.
understand that, Don, but how do you correct that? Were you bullied in high school?
No,
You were?
no.
Never
no,
bullied in high school?
No, no.
I was bullied in high school.
Well, you
And
were
I
a
used to
fighter.
box.
I find it hard to believe you were
I was
bullied.
bullied in high school. Yes, I was,
But
especially
were you
earlier
a boxer at the time?
on. No.
Okay, excuse me, John. I'll tell you one more time. Were you a boxer
No,
at the
but
time? No.
especially-
And if you were a boxer at the time,
But
John,
my
what
point
would have
is-
happened to the
my
kid who
point
bullied
is
you?
I didn't come back-
Excuse me. Does the term bloody nose?
Hey, wait a minute.
Okay.
I had a gun. I didn't come back with my gun into the
You
school.
went with a gun to school?
No, I said I had a
Okay.
gun. I didn't go back
No, I'm
into the
just
school
having
with a
fun
gun.
with you now, John.
And I know you are. You're trying. I don't know
I'm
if you're-
trying. I'm having a wonderful time.
And I
here.
never thought of taking my parents' butter knives to school.
No.
Afterwards. What did we do? We said, okay, I'll meet you
How
after
could
school.
a guy bully
You
you?
go out
I don't-
after school
no,
and you
no,
settle it. You
no.
don't bring
Well, that's
guns
right.
and knives. And,
That's right.
right.
Well, I did go out of school afterwards and settle a few problems, but I didn't consider myself bullied at the time. I just thought it would be the proper thing to go out of school and settle it after school. I blame
Oh,
many.
you went out and discussed it after school?
we
That's
didn't
what
dis-
Obama did.
no,
you
we
know.
didn't discuss
When he
it, no.
settled his arguments after
Who's this?
school, Obama, when he was bullied, he went out and he said, "I'll see you after school." And when the guy got out there, he said, "Let's discuss it." You know that's why.
I don't think I'd want to pick if I. And the other thing is, of course, when I, it's a different. We don't need to say it's a different. It's a different world. In the days when I was in school, you fought certain people. You
Right,
did. You had
right,
fist fights with them,
Yeah.
and then they were your friends afterwards.
Because there were bullies in school.
and it
They'd
wasn't.
run around just the hallways looking for somebody to beat up. You know that. They did in my school.
Well, oh, okay.
You must have had a,
Very nice school.
I guess.
But see, today everybody gets on a bus, and you can't get in trouble on a bus to throw you off the bus. So you don't have. I'm not saying it was right to have the fights after school, but there were fights after school, and there were fights in gym. I can remember teachers.
And what happened
Get out the
invariably?
gloves.
What happened invariably after you had the fight in school?
It was a friend.
You became friends.
Yes,
You're no longer after each other, etc.
but people I would fight with weren't necessarily bullies. I didn't think it was
Well,
just one of those things.
No, but there were a few that were. A few, that's all they did.
Yeah.
They went around the school every day looking around. Hey. I mean, I got into one because a guy slammed my elbow in the locker.
That's why you learned to box.
Practically broke my arm, yeah. I know.
I
Okay.
can't picture somebody bullying you, but if you say so, John, you're on
No.
the honor system.
Yeah, I'm telling you, yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Because nobody bullied me. And look at me. Look at me.
Yep.
And people out there saying, what do you mean you weren't bullied? I'm sorry, I was not bullied. But one of the reasons I was not bullied was, though, that we all went to separate schools in those days. We all had fistfights as
Right.
kids. And then by the time we got to the high school, though, then we had to establish turf, if you will. So by the time we got to the high school, when we could really hurt each other, because prior to that we couldn't hurt.
Oh, you stopped?
We didn't.
Unfortunately.
Everybody knew who could fight.
I
It was
see what-
over.
Yeah, I see what
It
you're-
was over.
Okay.
You knew guys that could fight. You know, I went into a group of guys that my friend said, "You want to go in this group?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be nice, you know." And I looked at them and saying, "These are pretty tough guys." And then I think, "Oh, let me think. Who can I fight?" None. I couldn't fight one of them. Every one of them was tougher than I was. And so, but I knew this.
Yeah.
They knew it. I knew it. Nobody bullied me. We all knew where our turf was, and that's where it was. So I think there's more bullying going on today than there was when I was in school in the 40s. I believe that.
Although I'm going to tell you, I believe that we had a tougher mentality when we were younger because we had to be more independent. We have to look after ourselves. If we came home and said, "Oh, I had a tough time in school," our mothers didn't run to the school
No, they said-
and say, "Stop treating little
No.
Johnny
No,
like
no, they
this,
said,
or there's going to be trouble."
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
They didn't do that.
No.
They said, "What, you got in trouble? Now you're going in your room or whatever, and
yeah.
you're not going to get whatever." Okay, let me.
Okay, all right.
let me move on.
We run to the bullying. That's always a fun. I love talking about.
You
Because the
love that.
point is that bullying, unfortunately, goes on in schools today. It's not right.
Yeah.
We don't know how to handle it, and that's for another. Because that'll be a half hour if we got going on that.
Very
John.
well could be.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about, and again, for our audience, you probably saw in passing this situation down in Nevada between the government and some of the ranchers down there.
Yeah.
One rancher in particular,
Yeah.
where the government has been trying to get this rancher off of his land and get his cattle off the land for, I guess, years. It's been going through the court system,
Well,
et cetera.
may I say
For two reasons.
Say, you think you're saying that it was his land that they wanted him off? I thought it was governmental.
No, he was
prairie.
leasing the land,
Oh, okay.
but he was
Okay.
paying fees to the state,
And he wasn't, and he didn't pay.
and he didn't to the federal government. But his family, remember, the fees were new.
Yeah.
His family had been ranching and
Yeah.
raising cattle on this land since the 1800s.
Wow.
And when they told him, close shop, you're
Yeah.
moving off the land,
Yeah.
and he didn't want to pay the feds on principle, the Bureau of Land Management showed up with its officers. Dozens of armed officers show up on this guy's ranch. Now, I find it rather interesting and ironic in a way that you'll recall that the United States government was infamous in chasing the American Indian off of their land, even after treaties were made, even after they guaranteed the American Indians that they could keep their land. Now, that's interesting because now we have the government again, but this time, instead of the Indians, they're chasing the cowboys off the land, along with all the cattle
Yeah.
and so forth. So they show up with these arms. And what happens? Other people that feel the same way that this rancher felt.
I think they took some of his
We're talking
cattle.
Western guys. They
took
did.
some of his cattle.
They did. Western guys came to support him. And there ended up being hundreds of them that were supporting this rancher against the feds, against the Bureau of Land Management. And then Don's right.
Yeah.
Part of what they were doing to make the guy get off the land, pay the fees, whatever,
his fee. They were
they
taking-
stole 400 head of cattle from him out of a total of 900. So when all of this guy's friends and like-thinking people came in and said, "We want you, you better give this man his cattle back. You have no right to take his cattle."
That's right.
The standoff was so tense that people were had visions of Waco all
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
All over again.
Yeah.
Now, here's my question.
Yeah.
Does anybody working for the government have a brain?
I'm sure there's one out there.
You are? Okay, please let me know when you find them, because what else could they expect, Don? Did they want to escalate this thing into a Waco type thing? Oh, by the way, I omitted a very important fact. The other reason why the government wanted the cattle off of this range is because they were a threat to a certain turtle that they have on the land.
Spotted turtle.
A tortoise.
The old spotted
No,
turtle.
this is a tortoise
Yeah.
off the land. So anyway, Don, what are we thinking when we do something like that? When these guys show up with their guns, ready for high noon over this stupid thing? What, do we live in the United States of America anymore? Do we
we're
have freedom
pointing up
anymore?
a lot of things that the government does things, and when I originally started this show, one of the segments was, what were they thinking?
Right.
That is, you are correct 100% in my opinion on that. What were they thinking? The other one that comes close to it, I don't know, you're going to see, this is recent. They are now going after families of deceased people who owed taxes.
Their children. I did
And
hear
that
that.
one of the child was 8 years old
Yeah.
when the parent died.
Yeah.
And they're going after that person now to pay back taxes. I don't know if it's with interest, because that would be something. But you'd say, what is the government
Yeah.
becoming like our
Where does
enemy?
that come from?
Where does this thing
Where was the law written now that
It's
if your
just been
parents
written
pass
that you are-
away
yeah.
and they owe taxes,
Yeah,
right? There's suddenly, other than the estate, obviously, they could get taxes off the
Yeah.
estate.
yeah.
But if that's not enough to cover the
Yeah.
debt, where's the law that says that you can go after the kids and get the taxes paid? It's not the kids' fault if their
No.
parents owe taxes.
They didn't even know they did, probably.
Yeah,
It was under their Social
exactly.
Security. They collected some money.
It's
but
that
they-
kind of thinking that really, really,
No, you're right, you're
disturbs.
right. And the more we do it, John, aren't we having a good hour here? Because we've got mistreatment of veterans,
yeah, it's not
mistreatment of
looking good,
students,
Don.
mistreatment of farmers. The last person I thought they would mistreat would be the farmer, quite honestly. And then, of course, to take a child
Right.
that doesn't
agree.
even, and to say you're going to charge them money. So the
agree.
government,
abusive. It's
0-4
unbelievable.
for them today, John. 0-4.
yeah, they're not doing very well.
No.
They do some things that I like.
Well, but we're not taking them up today. This is
No,
next time.
That's right, okay.
No, but I agree with you, 100%.
Let me move on to the subject of Marines and the Army preparing women for combat.
Army and Marines or Marines?
Marines and Army
Okay,
preparing women for
and,
combat.
Navy?
Yeah. It didn't say anything about the
Okay,
Navy,
all
but
right.
I suppose that's possible.
Army and Marines.
But in the
okay.
context of
Well,
what it
because
says.
Marines are Navy,
it's-
they
yeah,
don't want to admit
it's
that.
more,
but
It's
they-
more the direct hand-to-hand combat issue.
Yeah.
Now, for
Yeah.
those of you that missed it, Don and I had a show, in a previous show, where we discussed this topic rather fully.
Yes, we've talked
And
about
we
it.
weren't in
Yeah.
agreement on this
Or
topic
not, we agree to
necessarily.
disagree on that.
Yeah, we agreed to disagree on that, of women in combat. But
Yes.
I had a slight update here that I wanted you to hear because
Okay.
I think it's, it's important. First of all, I found out that the military is taking steps to prepare women for combat roles in 2016. That's when they would start, okay?
So they got to be
Hopefully-
enlisted for at least 4 years,
Yeah,
right?
Right, yeah. The Army is conducting a study to test just how fit a soldier has to be to engage in combat. The study involved 60 women and 100 men. 60 women and 100 men. CBS Crews reported on the developments last week.
Oh, my goodness.
15 young women Marines have taken the course.
Yeah.
All of them washed out, and all but one washed out on the first day. The Marines invited female officers to take the infantry officer course in 2012, and the 13-week course tests the mettle of potential infantry officers. That was the purpose of it. Now, to be fair, there were some men that washed out too, but obviously a far smaller number, and a great deal, the preponderance of the men made it all the way through the training. So what does that tell you, and what do you do about that? Do you say, okay, maybe we have to lower the standards so we can make sure that we have some women that pass this course? And by the way, just to add a little additional flavor to this, this is probably not the kind of thing we want to be looking at a time when Putin may very well, continue his rampage and his effort to take over additional countries. In other words, the potential for hand-to-hand combat is increasing. So what do you say?
I'd have to see what kind of testing they gave the 160 soldiers, I'll call them, 60 women, 100 men. I'd have to see exactly.
Well, wouldn't you think that they would come out with a program that would test whether or not, to their best knowledge, that these candidates were prepared to take on hand-to-hand combat?
Let me give you the soldiers' credo. War is well organized until the first shot.
That is true.
Then, and I will give you one other situation, which it's because down life's road I've found myself in very interesting things, and I've been very fortunate for that. We as military people were on a border between Yugoslavia and Italy. I'll call it Italy. It wasn't. It was a free territory of Trieste. And we had different military people in our units who were in charge of a squad, let's say. These people would make sure your gun was cleaned, your wall locker was well organized, and they would take you on marches and everything had to be just right. Wonderful people. I would say in the classics, some of my best friends, good friends of mine were that way. Suddenly, though, an alert, I'm going to use the word alert broke out. It was a situation which occurred which meant that there is a possibility that you're going to go out on a patrol and a good chance you're not coming back. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm merely explaining the situation at the time between the United States and Yugoslavia, which someday there should be either a comedy on it because actually it failed, it just fizzled. But what I will tell you is that some of those people, not all of them, but some of those people took their squads out as they had to, and suddenly the military, they're a lot brighter than people give them credit for. They found out very quickly that some of those people were fine to be in charge when things were quiet, but when there was suddenly the possibility that they could be killed, they weren't that good. I'm sorry to say that because some of them were friends of mine. They went, and it was difficult for them because they were tough on you, and suddenly they had to go back into the ranks. And who do they bring up? Somebody else. They had like tryouts to see who's going to take charge of this thing. So what I'm saying to you, yeah, I'm going to do it, and you're going to disagree. We're going to agree to disagree. I challenge that test because there's only one test for combat. That's combat. There's only one test to find out whether those. If someone told me that 50 women soldiers backed out on the first day or two, I want to take a pretty good look at who gave that test, what was that test all about. I'm not buying it, John. I'm not buying that out of 160 soldiers, 50 of them women, 49 of them backed out just about within a day or two. No.
Well,
no.
let me read the observation of one of those female soldiers directly.
From another
after
female
she
soldier?
Washed out.
No, from one of the
female soldier.
Okay.
After she washed out.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
One female applicant said there came a point during the training
All right.
when she could not persuade her body to perform.
Oh.
It wasn't a matter of will, but of pure physical strength, she wrote.
Oh.
My mind wanted more, but my muscles quivered in failure after multiple attempts. I began to shiver as I got cold. I was told I could not continue. Don, just the bottom line here is that
I'm not buying this.
some of this is a matter of physical strength, pure and simple.
There are women that are stronger
Yes,
than you
there
and I,
are,
my
and
friend. And when I was in the service, there were women that were stronger than me then. That is just the way it is.
I told
so
you.
I don't know where
they
found those
wait,
50 ladies, but I'm not
I
buying it.
told you at the time.
Yeah.
I told you at the time that there's no doubt when you're talking about one-on-one confrontation, I can go out and find a woman that can take care of you in short order.
They couldn't find
take
50.
Care of me in short
They couldn't
order.
find 50.
Take care of me in short. The point is,
I
these
gotta
women
look at
that
that.
want to volunteer
Yeah.
to get into these positions.
We're going down
I'm
on
say-
on the wire now.
I'm saying I
We're gonna
can't do this.
continue this 2 weeks from now.
Looks like we haven't
we're gonna-
resolved this yet, and we'll have to resolve it again.
And
So
we
thank you very much for being
Thank you
with
for
us
watching, and
tonight.
we will continue this.